story that we've broken on ET Now today. The Narendra Modi government wants to challenge the Google Play Store and provide an alternative. The idea being to make the Indian startup ecosystem, the Indian app ecosystem, truly Aatmanirbhar. This is what we are understanding from our sources in the government. We've been told, for example, that C-DAC has been asked to develop the Aatmanirbhar App Store. We don't know if that's going to be the name finally, but C-DAC has been asked to do so. What we are also being told by our sources is that you could see an existing government app store by the name of Mobile Seva being ramped up for this very purpose. Why is the government doing this? In the recent past, you've seen a lot of furor and the Indian startups ask the government for its help. What has happened the last few days is, first up, you had India's most valuable startup, Paytm, being taken down from the Google Play Store for allegedly violating its anti-gambling policy. Soon thereafter, you saw Google updating its Play Store policy, which will come into effect for all apps from September of next year. With this, Google has mandated that all apps for which there is any kind of transaction activity carried out on the Play Store, including downloads, buying maybe extra playtime, additional playtime for an app, or even if you're subscribing to music, fitness, education, all of that would be covered. So it added many more catalogs. The startups are upset because this would mean they would have to share a 30% fee with Google. But it doesn't just end there. With Google being responsible for all the transactions that are taking place, it also means the platforms are decided by Google. And what we have seen right now is that you have UPI, you have cards, you have the Google codes that can be redeemed, but the e-wallets, the Indian e-wallets, third-party e-wallets are not on the Google Play Store. We're talking about the likes of Paytm as well as PhonePe. So seeing all of this, the Narendra Modi government thinks it's time it intervenes, has skin in the game. As a senior government official told me, Android devices have a 97% market share. So we think it's time for the government to intervene. Now, we're also being told the government is considering the policy, the notion of instructing Android to make sure this new app store that is in the works by the government comes pre-installed in India. Can the Indian government actually challenge Google with its own version of the App Store? Is this even the job of the government? And didn't the startups know about the 30% fee before they started building their product? I'm going to be discussing this and more with my two panelists, Mr. Mohan Das Pai as well as Ashish from Bloom. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you.
Mr. Mohan Das Pai, let me come to you first. So the government is planning to do this with the idea of making the app ecosystem truly Aatmanirbhar and provide an alternative to Google, which in India with its Play Store has a massive edge because the Android devices have almost a 97% market share. Do you think this is the way to go? Should it be the government who is doing this?
Well, I would prefer a private party to do it under strict regulation of the government because it creates a quasi-monopoly. In fact, I would not like a C-DAC to do it. I would like NPCI to do it because NPCI handles UPI. They know about it. They're much more customer friendly. They're in the commercial area. They know what to do, how to do, etc. They don't follow government rules. They're a limited company and they'll be much better. So government has to be careful. We don't get in the clutches of another government department or a government organization, but a quasi one like NPCI, which has got this. Now, why do we need this? You see, the problem is the world is looking at the consequences of getting involved with digital monopolies. Apple is created its own monopoly system, and Google has created its own monopoly system. Facebook has created its own monopoly system. Facebook has 2.8 billion people on Facebook, and they can use all the data at the back end. They can store it where they want, and they're like quasi-government. They can turn you off. They can shut you off. There is no source of appeal. And most of them have got some juveniles at the back end who decide and interpret what the rules are. And most of them have contractual obligations with you, even though they become public utilities. As public utilities, where a lot of people come on and use the platform, you are supposed to have special rules with protection for the consumer. There is no protection for the consumer. There is no right of appeal. They can do what they want. They can shut you off like they did for Paytm and for many other people. And people have to suffer that. Then on top of that, to charge 30% means a lot of money is going out. So we need a Play Store which can be done. Jio can do it because Jio has got 380 million people. Airtel can do it, but Airtel should know how to market that and do it. maybe NPCI, somebody should do it. So getting an Indian player to do it and getting everything else will be a good idea. Of course, the question of a tightly integrated operating system or any other system there will be very important. And like you said just now, when people buy a phone, it should come pre-loaded onto it so people know what to do. Otherwise, getting it loaded again is going to be a problem. I think for that we require a regulation or a law or some kind of a mechanism to do it. But it's good to have an Indian Play Store where Indian startups can put up, and we can stop this bleeding of money going outside.
Right.
And so far, with Google you could work because there's no payment. With payment coming in, it's going to be an unbearable burden.
Let me come to you now, Ashish. You've heard how Mr. Mohandas Pai has also said that you don't want this money going out. My question to you is, it's not as if the startups didn't know at the time of building their product that they would have to pay a 30% fee, whether it is for the niche audience that use iOS or whether it is those that use Android. So why the furor now?
So, Narendra, there are two parts to this whole problem. One is that in a digital world, I think the platforms will definitely have their say, and there will be definitely tendencies to be monopolistic in approach and call the shots. In a scenario like that, when you couple it with the current timing, I think it gets excessively troublesome. It's not that had the timing been better, one would be okay to live with it. It's a combination of multiple factors. The fact that a platform is saying that we will be charging a significantly high fee from all of the participants in the ecosystem, it's as good as loading another tax. So if every corporation has its view that the government should only levy so much tax and create more flexibility in enabling the ecosystem, the larger corporations which are in a monopolistic situation should also behave in the same way and not be in that position where they will basically decide on who should do what and how people should consume. So when you combine all of these factors, I think the ethical moral responsibilities of all of the participants definitely becomes much larger. And in a tech ecosystem and environment, I think one needs to definitely have our own ecosystem and platforms that are going to take care of the local ecosystem. That is the most important thing. Whether it is what we talk about, the smaller players, the retailers, the startups, the overall ecosystem, till such time that we are not going to be self-reliant and self-regulated, this is definitely not going to be the optimum solution. At any point in time, we will be dependent on somebody or the other. And so far as everybody chooses to play fair, I think it's all good. I don't think if people would have been really worried if these practices were going to be open, transparent, and not anti-competitive. It only gets into that territory where people are going to get upset when people are feeling that, okay, I don't know how things are going to shape out, and too much of my future is uncertain at the hands of somebody else who may change with the person in the chair. So it is these 2-3 factors combined when they have an impact.
Okay, all points are very well taken in. Now, Mohandas Pai, what we've also seen overseas is large apps, the likes of Spotify, Tinder, Epic Games that owns the gaming sensation Fortnite come together to make an advocacy group to demand better safety for apps, to demand a better environment for apps and a level playing field from both Google as well as Apple. So I'm going to once again ask you the same question. In India, should it be the government or should it be the large apps coming together and saying nothing doing? Once you do that, once you have large apps, you start bargaining and negotiating. Isn't that the way to go? Or you just have a case where Google will say nothing doing, this is our global policy.
Well, Google says the global policy because they don't care. They got a monopoly, and the monopoly is very dangerous. We can't have a global monopoly. I've been saying it for some time. The world is suffering from global monopolies trying to dominate our lives. And it's a big, big danger for most governments, because governments can protect your rights, but against Google is a contract, and Google can do what you want. They can shut you off from the system. There is no right of appeal. You have to go beg them, and they'll treat you like a supplicant. So I think it's very dangerous. And I think a group of people coming together, creating a self-regulatory organization, clear rules is the best thing. The second best thing is having somebody doing it. I would like the government to do it because, this requires a lot of maintenance. It requires oversight. It requires somebody to make sure that, the rules are followed clearly. It requires a right of appeal, many, many things which are very, very deeply technical, and government may not have the capability. They may spoil it. So I wouldn't like C-DAC or any government department or MeitY doing it. but they can be the catalyst to get a private sector or a quasi-private sector organization which has got the technical ability, which will work with the private sector, which will be neutral, which is not into the business, to do that with the very clear rules. And are a self-regulatory organization of all the big app companies, where you charge a small fee on an annual basis for being on that app store, and they will take care of all the maintenance and all the technical matters. So I think that's the way it has to go. Not a government department, not a government organization.
Okay. Actually, some valid points that have been made there by Mohandas Pai, and also from a consumer perspective, how comfortable will they be, whether it is dating or gaming or studying or chatting on on an app that's downloaded from a government platform. I guess only time is going to tell us that. But you understand the business and the metrics that startups work on. How are they going to work on this? That, okay, we have to give 30% to Google, but you could have an alternative. We'll have to give fees over there. Now, we just know about this. We don't know if other entrepreneurs are planning their own ecosystems. How many Play Stores will apps be on?
Yeah, I think that is a very valid concern, Nayantara. I think people will have to, there is definitely a cost on one side or the other. Either you're going to suffer a variable cost throughout as you grow in your journey as a startup or a tech business, or you have to be ready for maintenance and liaising with multiple agencies to have your app on the respective stores. So I think that is a very valid concern. That said, I think people definitely will be looking at solutions that help them balance power. Today, the most important feature is going to be that people are going to evaluate it financially. And when people realize that there is going to be some sort of a level playing field, people realize that there is going to be hopefully more transparency with near similar quality of maintenance and operations. I think they definitely will welcome it. I do agree with Mr. Pai when he said that the government should not be doing it, and they can sponsor it, they can encourage and they can facilitate the whole thing. At the end of the day, haven't we all been saying for a while that the best thing for the government is not to be in the business of business? And when you are going to facilitate, I think it is going to be definitely done at a very different level. And one can expect that you will have the same level of finesse, quality, operations and efficiencies as a private player. I'm not really worried that the government cannot compete on quality, etc. But at the same time, it should continue to provide the facilitator role it has taken over the last 6-7 years in the tech ecosystem. And we have seen the benefits of the government being a facilitator. I don't think we should lose that advantage, and government continuing to be in that position and facilitating it to other private players. Whether it's a group of players coming together, it's a members of the ecosystem, by the ecosystem kind of, or it is some other people, players who are going to do a consortium.
Mohandas Pai, whether we like it or not, when we do use the App Store of Apple or whether we use the Play Store of Google, at least in the consumer's mind, it brings about a certain level of comfort when it comes to security and payment safety. That's going to be very important if anybody is going to come out with an alternative.
No, it's very important. That's why I said NPCI, because NPCI handles payments. So it's very safe. They handle UPI. I just read that they did 1.8 billion transactions in the month of September, and they know how to do it. They handle the payment system. They're well regulated. So somebody like that who is used to this kind of a system, so people can trust them, and they can trust them to pass on their transactions, and they know that it will be done well, and they can expand the infrastructure, because you have to expand infrastructure, you have to invest. So they should charge a fat fee for everybody, and maybe that will work. So I think you have to be very careful how it is done. See, the best example of this kind of a thing is the India Stack. Now, who is doing the India Stack? A part of the India Stack went to UIDAI, right? And you don't pay for it because government meets all the expenditure. It's done as a matter of national need. The second is the UPI. Now, UPI has gone on to NPCI, which has handled it beautifully. It is scaled up to 1.8 billion transactions, and it's become a very dominant app compared to everybody. So I think it works very well. So there are these two organizations, but UIDAI is very different. It is regulated by government. It's got a chance of a regulator, whereas NPCI is not a regulator. It is it can be taken the role of an SRO. So I would prefer the NPCI model. It can be done quickly, fast. They got a balance sheet. They can raise capital. They can do many things.
Okay.
The Reserve Bank of India is coming out asking for more NPCIs to come, right? Payment corporations to come, so they can have it. So it has to be done in a very different manner. But the big thing is we want clear rules. We don't want to pay 30% at a very high cost. Nobody should be kicked out unless there's a right of appeal.
Yeah.
There must be safeguard for all the startups, all the safeguards, and it has to be to tough regulations. It cannot be through a one-sided contract that you have. Today with Google, Apple, you just sign a contract. We don't read it. You know, everything is in their favor. Everything belongs to them. I mean, that is no longer valid around the world. They're digital monopolies. They're very dangerous. In fact, you'll be very surprised. I've been writing and saying the world requires a universal declaration of digital rights. Like we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Digital Rights, to make sure all our data is safe, we are protected, we get access, we don't get thrown out of the network, etc.
Yeah.
It's a big issue.
Okay. I'm running out of time. So Ashish, I'm going to give this final question to you before we wrap up. And that is, some concerns that have been coming in as well since we broke the story. Now, can you have an effective app store at all without your own indigenous OS, your own operating system? Is that possible at all, or you don't have to relate the two?
It's a valid concern, but there are ways to do it when you are going to work in partnerships, and there are ways to solve it. I don't think that should become an impediment in implementing something like this. We definitely will end up missing the wood for the trees if we are going to get caught up in this.
I want you both to answer this in a simple yes and no, because we're running out of time. Mohandas Pai, is it possible for an Indian app store to take on the mighty Google Play Store? Is it possible? Can it be effective?
It is possible if all of us, all the startups, the big ones get together and the government backs us up, it's possible.
Ashish, is it possible? Will it have to be backed up maybe by the large startup saying we're not going to be on the Google Play Store? You want to use us? Come on this app store.
There are enough precedents. Over the last 10 years, the digital ecosystem has shown what a massive difference can be made by our own businesses. I'm very convinced it is possible. It's not easy for sure, but it is, to your question, yes, it is possible.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for being candid and joining us on this edition of the Startup Central. I hope your plans for the long weekend. Now, before we wrap up our special coverage on the big story that we broke on ET Now, we leave you with a soundbite we got from Amit Ranjan. He's a co-founder of SlideShare, and he's the architect of the DigiLocker.
That the government in general should not be the prime operator with these kind of platforms. But the government can at the same time play a valuable role as far as being the initiator is concerned. At the foundational level, if there are certain things that need to be done, there's some policy that needs to be said, there's some kind of evangelism that needs to be done, the government can very well play that role and eventually pass that on to the private sector, to the startup space for them to run. So in the medium to long run, I completely agree that the government is probably not the right entity to be the operator, but they can play a valuable role in being the initiator, being one of the creators of the platform. I do think that the government should not be the operator in the medium to long term. That is something which I feel is kind of a role that may not be in line with what the government itself wants to do or its capabilities are best suited for. So in terms of running the platform or the operations, it might need to pass over to somebody else. But in terms of doing just the formative foundational work in putting together what the platform could look like, what some of the policies could be, how you could actually grandfather some of the the multinationals into this ecosystem, I think the government can play a very valuable role there.